Joey Ramone walked onto the stage like a misplaced ghost. Nearly 2 meters tall, so thin you'd think a gust of wind could knock him over, long hair covering half his face, and those black sunglasses he never took off. No one imagined that this man would end up changing the history of rock. He didn't have a perfect voice. He didn't have refined performance techniques. He didn't chase the approval of the media. So why did the whole world choose to listen to someone who always felt lost, even while standing before thousands of fans? Joey Ramone was made of the very things most artists try to hide: illness, fear, psychological obsessions, heartbreak, and the quiet betrayals simmering inside the very band he devoted his life to. From a child suffering severe OCD to a singer battling schizoaffective disorder while stepping on stage night after night, his life was filled with so much pain, it's hard to believe he could sing even a single line. So what turned all that strangeness into magnetism? What made a man who barely spoke off stage become the irreplaceable voice of an entire generation? The story of Joey Ramone, from the darkness of his childhood to the bright lights of cbgb, from the tragedies of love to his final battle with cancer, will show you this. Sometimes, it's the souls most fractured that create the echoes that last the longest. Only by retracing the path back to where everything began, back to a childhood where darkness always arrived earlier than light, can those questions about strangeness and magnetic pull be answered. Joey Ramone, born Jeffrey Ross Hyman in 1951 in Forest Hills, Queens, grew up in a seemingly ordinary middle-class Jewish family. But from the moment he entered the world, life handed him an unusual fate. He was born with a parasitic twin, an undeveloped twin mass that doctors surgically removed when he was only a few days old. The scar faded, but the feeling of being incomplete followed him forever, as if his body and soul were always missing a piece no one could see. His family didn't stay whole for much longer. When Joey was 7, his parents divorced. No one explained why. What remained was a cold, quiet gap the lanky boy had to fill on his own. Joey and his brother Mickey Lee lived with their mother Charlotte, a strong, artistic woman who believed freedom was the soil where creativity grew. She took her sons to the movies, played them the Beatles, introduced them to The Who and the groundbreaking sounds of the era. Culture opened a wide door for Joey, yet it couldn't chase away the loneliness growing inside a child who never quite knew how to blend into the world around him. His years at Forest Hills High School were a blur of wandering the schoolyard like a shadow. He shot up taller than his classmates early on, his thin frame stretched as if pulled by some invisible force, making him an easy target for teasing. But the strangeness wasn't just physical. From a young age, Joey suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, so crippling that stepping out of the house each morning became a battle, checking the door lock dozens of times, repeating every motion until exhaustion. Some days he stood at the doorway for nearly an hour just to make sure he had closed it right. To kids his age, Joey was the weird one. To himself, he was simply frightened. That sense of fear only deepened when, as a teenager, Joey was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a condition combining symptoms of psychosis with intense mood fluctuations. It wasn't the kind of illness a boy could share with anyone. Deep down, Joey believed there was something inside his mind and body that didn't work like everyone else's. Before he had time to adjust, another blow struck the family. Joey's stepfather died in a car accident while his mother was away on vacation. One loss piled onto another, and in their small Queens apartment, all that remained were 3 people trying to rebuild a family that had fractured too many times to count. In a world where Joey never felt he belonged, only music opened another door. He submerged himself in The Who, David Bowie, Iggy Pop and Phil Spector's girl groups. He sat for hours beside his BBC radio, teaching himself to drum along to whatever played, as if repeating those rhythms could steady his own breathing. Then came the guitar, then singing. Not good, not polished, but for the first time, Joey felt something loosening inside him, something freeing him from the invisible loops that had ruled his life. In that long stretch of loneliness, music was more than refuge. It was the only hand pulling Joey out of a wounded childhood. And from those broken pieces, he would one day build the most unmistakable voice punk rock had ever heard. Music saved Joey from the loneliness of childhood. And it was music that opened the first door into a world where those labeled not normal were allowed to shine in their own way. As he turned 20, Joey began searching for a real stage, somewhere noise and lights could fill the empty spaces his childhood left behind. In 1972, he joined Sniper, a small glam punk band in the heart of New York, and transformed into Jeff Starship, a name that sounded both arrogant and alien, much like the person he was at the time. Sniper played in rooms thick with cigarette smoke, flickering neon lights, and wooden floors that creaked under every stomp. The Mercer Arts Center, Max's Kansas City, the Coventry. These were the breeding grounds of early punk misfits, the places where New York dolls waltzed around in bright costumes, where suicide experimented with sounds no one dared to label. Under the gold-tinted lights of Mercer, Jeff Starship stood among the chaos, a tall, awkward figure radiating an energy that was hard to explain, as if he were trying to break every mold his mind and body had never fit into. Sniper didn't make Joey a star, but that period felt like a trial by fire. He learned that a stage didn't need perfection. It needed truth. The unformed, sandpaper-rough voice, the way he held the microphone as if it replaced a missing part of his body, every lean, every short, breathy note. Together, they created a presence raw but impossible to look away from. Sniper quickly shifted lineups, shifted sound, shifted ambition, while Joey kept drifting between two selves. A fragile soul desperate for shelter, and an artist yearning to break free from his own restraints. In early 1974, he left the band. No one considered it a major event. A few regulars only remembered Jeff Starship as a strange figure flickering under Max's soft pink lights. Yet that seemingly small chapter became a crucial stepping stone because Joey had learned the most important lesson of his life. Strangeness was not a burden. It was the path. No one knew that just months later. From that same young man whose eyes never met anyone else's, punk rock would find the most revolutionary voice in its history. Leaving Sniper, Joey stepped into a strange quiet, a silence no longer frightening, but like a deep breath taken right before history-shifting noise explodes. And in that silence, he reconnected with two friends from Forest Hills, John Cummings and Douglas Colvin. Three men who had nothing in common, no formal musical training, no clear direction, but one shared hunger. To create music no other band dared to attempt. They rented a cramped, peeling rehearsal room at Performance Studios. Douglas renamed himself D.D. Ramone after reading that Paul McCartney once used the stage name Paul Ramone early in his career. Johnny liked the sharpness of it. Joey nodded. And just like that, they were all Ramones, declaring that the past no longer mattered, not even their birth names. Only punk did. In the early days, Joey sat behind the drum kit, hunched over as if trying to fold himself away from everyone else's eyes. Dee Dee stood up front screaming into the mic with volatile energy. Everything was messy. No one truly knew what they were doing. That rawness created something rare in music. A feeling so real it made listeners freeze. Only one problem. Dee Dee's voice couldn't survive that level of intensity. After just a few trial shows, his vocal cords were done. While audition after audition for a new singer failed, Tommy Erdelai, a close friend acting as their manager, noticed what everyone else had overlooked. Joey, who hardly ever met anyone's gaze, had a strange voice, jagged, offbeat, thin to the point of breaking, yet capable of compressing emotion in a way no trained vocalist ever could. A voice not born for performance, but one that could articulate the loneliness millions of kids were carrying in their chest. Tommy suggested Joey step up as lead singer. The moment Joey rose from the drum stool and held the microphone with trembling hands was the moment the real Ramones were born. After failing to find a suitable drummer, Tommy sat down at the drum kit himself. The lineup locked into place. Johnny, whose guitar sliced the air into straight, decisive strokes. Dee Dee, whose bass hit like an outlet for every bottled-up frustration. Tommy, whose drumming was sharp and unsentimental. And Joey, with a voice like no other, a pain that somehow knew how to sing. The March 30th, 1974 event at Performance Studios was only a test show, but those who witnessed it felt something shifting. No theatrics, no drawn-out solos, just speed, minimalism, and a sense of combustion building like a slow-fused bomb. On August 16, 1974, the Ramones set foot on the CBGB stage. After just a few songs, the place transformed into their home. CBGB, where every misfit, street performer, and untrained musician gathered, embraced them like a missing piece in the DNA of the punk movement, brewing there. The Ramones didn't just perform, they became the heartbeat of the venue. By the end of the year, they had played more than 70 shows, each one barely 17 minutes long, but enough to make CBGB the sacred ground of a new genre. The noise poured out, reaching the ears of producers accustomed to the glossy rock of the era. One night at CBGB, Seymour Stein of Sire Records walked in and instantly recognized something unprecedented. Ultra short, ultra fast, ultra instinctive music, anchored by a voice that reminded listeners of their own anxiety. By late 1975, Sire signed the Ramones, a decision that seemed reckless, but became one of the defining moments in American punk rock history. From the slightly offbeat drum hits in a decrepit Queens rehearsal room to the packed nights at CBGB, the Ramones machine had begun. None of them knew they were starting a revolution. They only knew that when Joey stood before the microphone and shouted lines so short, they sounded like unfinished thoughts. The world, for the first time, truly listened. The Ramones' presence at CBGB was a small explosion, but 1976 was when its shockwave truly began to spread. Four strange-looking men playing music built entirely on speed and instinct walked into Sire Records' studio that February to record their debut album. They didn't expect much. No one believed that songs made of 3 chords and lyrics so short they sounded unfinished could go far. Ramones was released in April. 14 tracks, most under 2 minutes, like bullets fired straight into the glossy rock then dominating radio. Critics called it a slap to the music industry. Some magazines hailed the album as an antidote to classic rock, which was becoming bloated with technical excess. But on the Billboard charts, it only reached number 111, a cold, indifferent number that contradicted how the underground world saw the album. The beginning of a new era. Joey appeared on the early tour stages with a look that was quickly becoming iconic. Hair covering nearly his entire face, dark glasses hiding eyes that never wanted to meet anyone's. A posture, like an extraterrestrial, accidentally teleported onto a stage. And that voice, rough, repetitive, uneven, became the band's identity. 1977 marked a major leap forward. the Ramones released Leave Home and Rocket to Russia, two albums that crystallized the vocabulary of American punk rock. Leave Home gave birth to Pinhead, with its chant, "Gabba Gabba Hey," a tiny line that became a secret code for an entire community. From American fans to Europeans, from misfits to young people who felt trapped in the monotony of everyday life. Rocket to Russia, bright, tight, and rhythm-heavy, became their most successful early album, reaching number 49 on Billboard. A remarkable feat for a band still considered too loud to succeed. Amid this explosion, the Ramones took their music to the stage in a way no one had before. Every show felt like a fire. No breaks, no small talk. Each song crashing into the next with just seconds in between, creating a pressure cooker energy that left the audience breathless. The New Year's Eve 1977 show at the Rainbow Theatre in London was recorded, and 2 years later became the live album, It's Alive. Many critics still consider it the greatest punk live recording ever made, not just because it captured sound, but because it captured the band's full insanity at their peak. While the stage was exploding, the studio in 1978 became the site of a risky experiment, Road to Ruin. The band tried acoustic elements, tried ballads, tried expanding song structures. For many early fans, it felt like a sudden detour. For Joey, it was an effort to show that punk could stretch farther than what people boxed it into. The album didn't make the Billboard Top 100, a disappointment that hit the band hard. Some critics even claimed the Ramones had gone soft. What no one realized was that when Joey sang those slower, gentler melodies, he was reaching into corners of his psyche that speed alone could never touch. The feeling of being left behind, the weight of loneliness, and the desire to be seen as a whole human being, not just a symbol of rebellion. The years 1976-1980 became a paradox for the Ramones. Not wealthy, not on mainstream radio, not superstars, yet every show felt like they were writing history. And at the center of that storm was Joey, the man with the technically wrong voice, the body that defied aesthetic conventions, the mind full of internal battles. Yet he held the key that carried punk from the streets into legend. Road to Ruin didn't break them into the mainstream, but it opened the door to an even more turbulent phase, one where the Ramones entered with ambitions of finally breaking into the mainstream and emerged with fractures that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As the 70s came to an end, Sire Records wanted the Ramones to take another leap. They brought in Phil Spector, the legendary producer behind The Wall of Sound, the architect of immortal hits for the Ronettes, the Crystals, the Beatles. The idea was to combine punk's rawness with Spector's dense, 60s layered sound, making the Ramones into something radio couldn't ignore. Joey entered the project full of hope. He had grown up with Spector's work, with the girl groups he listened to on BBC Radio, so this collaboration felt like a dream resurrecting itself. But the studio atmosphere was the opposite of what they hoped for. Spector demanded absolute precision in every beat, every hit, every repeated part, a rigid discipline that suffocated a band built on instinctive speed. Stories later circulated about Spector holding DD at gunpoint, turning the sessions into psychological torture. Although people involved disputed the extremity of the tale, the undeniable truth was that the sessions dragged on to exhaustion. Joey, who alone could endure Spector's meticulous methods, was forced into a painful position between his childhood idol and bandmates who felt betrayed. End of the Century was released in 1980, reaching number 44 in the US, the highest chart position of the Ramones' career. Its sound was brighter, thicker, more pop-oriented. Tracks like Do You Remember Rock and Roll Radio showed a blend of nostalgia and punk speed. Joey saw the album as proof that the Ramones could transcend the underground band label. Johnny saw it coldly. To him, this wasn't the Ramones' sound. It was Phil Spector wearing their skin. This period marked a turning point, widening the quiet divide between Joey and Johnny and planting seeds of tension that would last nearly 2 decades. As Joey tried to keep the band's spirit alive, more changes closed in. Subterranean Jungle, 1983, blended 60s pop with punk speed, giving it a sound both familiar and strange. It charted at number 83, the last Ramones album to reach the Billboard 100. Behind the scenes, though, the band was staggering. Marky Ramone was fired due to severe alcoholism, forcing them to find a new drummer. Richie Ramone joined like a shot of adrenaline, younger, disciplined, playing harder, reviving some of the momentum they were losing. In 1984, the Ramones released Too Tough to Die, a slap in the face to anyone who thought the band had lost their edge. The album returned to the true punk core, raw, fast, metallic, but with deeper melodies. Critics called it a rebirth of the Ramones. Joey especially shone with a voice that mixed restrained anger and unnameable sorrow, a combination only someone carrying lifelong wounds could sing so naturally. Still, the internal fractures never disappeared. They were only pushed aside. Richie, despite helping revive the band, left in 1987 after a merchandising money dispute with Johnny. It wasn't just about finances, it reflected a deeper question. Where did power lie in the Ramones? Who defined the soul of the band, and who was seen as replaceable? Richie's departure closed a chapter of revival and left Joey standing among bandmates who kept drifting away, while he fought to keep the Ramones from sinking amid a decade of constant cultural shifts. The Ramones' explosion during this era wasn't just albums, tours, or chart positions. It was a journey marked by wounds of unmet expectations, buried conflicts, and attempts at rebirth that always demanded a price. And Joey, as always, carried the heaviest share of that damage. Richie's departure left a void the Ramones couldn't fill with any option other than returning to the past. Marky rejoined the band in the late 80s, more sober after rehab, more technically solid, and more withdrawn. The reunion felt like an attempt to grab onto their glory years. But the world around them had already changed. Punk was no longer at the front lines. The market had shifted to glam metal and then alternative rock, while the Ramones kept hammering out the same familiar 2.5-minute heartbeat in a music landscape shifting violently beneath them. Within that context, Brain Drain, 1989, arrived like an unexpected spark. The album wasn't a masterpiece, nor was it praised by the press, but it contained something the Ramones rarely touched: an actual hit. Pet Sematary, inspired by Stephen King, pushed Joey's strange, unmistakable voice onto radio stations across the United States. Its dark, catchy, slightly mournful melody allowed the song to break past pure punk and reach a mainstream audience. Yet even in that brief moment of ascent, the atmosphere within the band thickened with tension. Dee Dee left after Brain Drain, exhausted by years of addiction and the feeling of being trapped in a musical identity that never changed. Joey lost the bandmate who had been the creative heart of the Ramones, a blow that left him both shaken and unsure of the band's future. In 1991, the Ramones signed with Radioactive Records, a decision that felt more like necessity than choice. They needed a new home, needed some connection to the younger musicians who were now treating them as ancestors of alternative rock. Mondo Bizarro, 1992, was the result of that shift. The album didn't succeed in the US, but it went gold in Brazil. A paradox that showed the Ramones, though pushed out of the center, still resonated deeply in places where Joey's loneliness sounded like liberation. Acid Eaters, 1993, sent the band into nostalgia, a full album of covers of the artists they had grown up idolizing: The Who, The Rolling Stones, Jefferson Airplane. Joey didn't sing those songs to prove anything. He sang them as if reminding himself of the original reason he ever lived. Music had saved him, and now he was repaying that debt by revisiting his roots. Still, fatigue had seeped into every part of the band. Endless touring, declining health, unresolved internal conflicts, and the brutal reality that the Ramones had never achieved the commercial success they deserved. It all gathered into something impossible to avoid: an ending. Adios Amigos, 1995, carried a title that felt like both a concession and a proud farewell. Even as their final album, it still sounded unmistakably like the Ramones: straightforward, short, forceful, unvarnished. Joey recorded his parts in declining health, yet his voice sounded strangely strong, as if he knew this would be the last time he'd ever sing under the name Ramone. The years 1988-1995 were a constant oscillation between attempts at reinvention and the harsh truth of decline. The glory diminished, the conflicts stacked up, their strength ebbed, yet Joey remained front and center, holding the band together with a belief he never said aloud. If the Ramones disappeared, the world would lose a form of energy no other band could replace. The final years inside the Ramones felt like a marathon run in darkness. Everyone tired, everyone hurt, everyone wanting to reach the finish line but too exhausted to look back at one another. As the band stumbled through aging, illness, conflict, and shifting musical landscapes, Joey's personal life silently fractured in a way more painful than anything any other member would ever endure. Career disappointments never broke him, but a wound from love could. In the late 70s, just as the Ramones were becoming a familiar name at cbgb, Joey's private life opened a chapter that seemed gentler than anything he had experienced. Linda Daniele, a young, intelligent, lively woman, entered the band's orbit like a different kind of breeze. Not a rabid fan, not someone chasing the spotlight, simply someone drawn to the fragility and strangeness of the man hiding behind long hair and dark glasses. Linda saw what most fans never did: Joey's softness, his shyness, his effort to restrain every obsessive spiral so he could step on stage each night. Joey was not the kind of man who entered love with confidence. He loved quietly, sincerely, so gently that Linda often had to pull him out of his shell. They walked the small streets of Queens, listened to records in Joey's apartment, talked about things he almost never shared with anyone: illness, fear, the feeling of not belonging anywhere. That love softened Joey. As if for the first time he believed he could be loved without hiding his broken parts. Their relationship lasted years, without drama, without scandal, just two people trying to hold on to each other in a chaotic punk world. But as the band grew more famous, the hidden storms inside the Ramones grew too. Dee Dee's addiction, Johnny's authoritarian nature, Joey's illness and insecurity. Linda stood in the middle of all of it, exhausted in ways no one saw. The unease built, until the unimaginable happened. Linda stepped out of Joey's life and into Johnny Ramone's. Not a secret Hollywood-style affair, just a gradual shift, as Linda felt Joey drifting further away while Johnny offered her the stability he imposed on everything. In 1994, Linda and Johnny married. Joey never expressed the full depth of his feelings, but those close to him, especially his brother Mickey Lee, felt how deeply that blow cut. It wasn't just losing the woman he loved. It was losing her to the man who stood next to him on stage every night. Every time they toured afterward, Johnny on one side, Joey on the other, the distance between them wasn't a few feet. It was a wound that never closed. For years, the media tried to explain their conflict as personality differences, politics, or musical disagreements. But those inside knew these were just surface details. The root was Linda. Fans often debated the KKK took my baby away as a metaphor. Joey never confirmed it, but Mickey Lee wrote in his memoir that the stolen love story was the real inspiration. Johnny wasn't the KKK. He was the man who took Linda. Joey condensed his private heartbreak into a short, Ramones-style scream, but it carried the weight of something that had shattered him. The two men continued sharing the same stage for years, not speaking, not looking at each other, performing like machines built for punk. Audiences saw the ferocity of the Ramones. No one knew it was held together by a silent grudge that lasted until the end of Joey's life. A wound never named, but always present in that trembling voice, and those eyes hidden behind dark lenses. It was a short, quiet romance. Not dramatic, not scandalous, but enough to reshape the emotional structure of an artist already fragile from birth. To Joey, Linda wasn't just a former girlfriend. She was the one person who made him believe he could be fully loved, before everything shattered in silence. The collapse of his relationship didn't stop Joey, but it changed the way he existed. In the years after his heart was split in two, Joey gradually stepped out from the heavy shadow of the Ramones to find a new space, one where music was no longer chained to the band's constant internal tension, where he could breathe without having to be on guard with Johnny standing behind him. His work outside the Ramones during the 80s and 90s wasn't loud, didn't produce major hits, but it reflected Joey more clearly than anything else. Freed from the box he had long been trapped in, he became softer, more open, and far more collaborative than anyone ever imagined. In mid-1983, while the Ramones were entering a period of experimentation and exhaustion from internal conflict, Joey recorded with the Seclusions on a cover of "Nothing Can Change the Shape of Things to Come." His voice, no longer under the pressure of being Joey Ramone of the Ramones, became gentler, less jagged, as if he were temporarily removing his punk armor so he could relax. 2 years later, the kindness inside a rocker once dismissed as a weirdo led him into an unexpected project. Artists United Against Apartheid. It was a massive coalition of artists: Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Bono, Run DMC, Lou Reed, standing together against South African apartheid. Not many people knew Joey cared deeply about political and social issues, but his appearance here proved he wasn't only the voice of the lost and the lonely, he was also a voice for the oppressed. By the 1990s, as the Ramones neared the end of their journey, Joey experienced a new kind of freedom. He collaborated with the bubblegum punk band Helen Love, musicians who had grown up idolizing the Ramones, creating a bright, feminine, bubbly sound completely opposite his melancholic image. Joey didn't just record. He encouraged them to write, to experiment, to push their style outward, as if nurturing the next generation in the way no one had ever nurtured him. At the same time, he became a mentor and patron to the independents, managing them, producing them, supporting them musically and emotionally. To them, Joey wasn't a punk legend. He was like a gentle, older brother, always willing to step back so others could move forward. Few people know he wrote lyrics, revised melodies, and shaped their artistic direction for years, a quiet form of love Joey reserved only for those he deeply trusted. Joey also recorded with Native American rock group Blackfire on One Nation Under, a song expressing the anger and struggle of indigenous communities. That spirit of resisting injustice connected with Joey instantly. Not every artist carries their own loneliness in a way that makes them able to listen to the pain of others, but Joey always felt close to people the world pushed aside. Sometimes he even joined small, quirky projects no one would expect a punk legend to notice. The story of him co-writing Meatball Sandwich with Youth Gone Mad is the perfect example. A short, raw, chaotic punk track that sounded like a studio joke, but Joey approached it with complete seriousness. It showed that he never believed music had to be important to matter. To him, it was pure joy, the one thing that kept him alive amid endless personal suffering. Those small projects kept Joey standing while everything else slowly slipped out of his hands. The Ramones' career reached its end just as his body began to resist after years of anxiety, chronic stress, and panic attacks eating away at him. In 1995, when the band had just passed its 20-year mark, doctors delivered the news no one wanted to hear: lymphoma. Joey heard it as if hearing about someone else's fate. He didn't tell fans, didn't tell the press. He let the information stay within a handful of private conversations with family and a few trusted people. His small Manhattan apartment became his refuge. Joey went through treatment, then returned to the tiny home studio he had built, continuing to write songs even though he didn't know how much time he had left. Sometimes the illness kept him awake for nights. But every morning Joey told himself he had to record another vocal, had to write another melody. The battle wasn't in the hospital, it was in the daily decision to keep his heart beating for music, not for death. When the Ramones disbanded in 1996, everyone assumed Joey would rest, but he did the opposite. He sat before a microphone and became a solo artist for the first time in his life. Without Johnny beside him, without DD's volatility, without relentless touring, Joey entered the studio like a man shedding chains. Every song written during that time carried a strange calm, as if he knew his first solo album would also be his last. The making of Don't Worry About Me stretched across treatment breaks, during days when Joey had to lean against the wall to catch his breath before singing another line. His body was failing, but his voice kept its signature Joey quality, trembling, honest, incapable of hiding emotion. Those who worked with him said that each time he finished a track cleanly, Joey smiled like a child who had just pushed through the hardest exam of his life. Not many people can sing while fighting cancer. Yet, Joey sang with an almost surreal peace. By April 2001, his body could no longer keep up. He was admitted to New York Presbyterian in a state of severe exhaustion. Family and a few closest friends took turns visiting, while Joey tried to maintain a calm expression, as if he were just recovering from a particularly long cold. Time thickened in that stark white room. Joey still wanted to listen to music, not punk, but something soft, U2's In a Little While. On April 15, 2001, that song was playing when Joey exhaled his last breath. No noise, no lights, no media. Just Bono's voice brushing the air like a gentle farewell. Joey left this world with a softness life had rarely given him. His memorial was attended by people woven into punk history. Tommy Ramone standing quietly in the back, Richie Ramone arriving with reddened eyes, CJ Ramone holding Joey's mother's hand as if to steady her. Debbie Harry, Joan Jett, and countless punk and alternative artists came not to mourn a legend, but to say goodbye to a soul they knew had fought all his life just to stay standing. No stage, no microphone, no applause. Only a room full of people who understood that a part of them would go silent forever from that day onward. Joey left exactly the way he entered music. Not loud, not demanding, not seeking recognition, but leaving behind an emptiness no one on earth could ever fill. Joey's death didn't close a chapter of punk rock. It marked the moment the world finally realized the power they had only glimpsed behind that curtain of hair and those unmoving black sunglasses. For 2 decades, the Ramones had never sold like Aerosmith. Never dominated the charts like Led Zeppelin. Never been as wealthy as the Rolling Stones. Yet every time a new band picked up a guitar and declared they wanted to play something fast, raw, real, they named Joey Ramone. That influence didn't come from vocal technique or glamorous stagecraft, but from the rarest thing in popular music, honesty so pure it felt almost fragile. Joey sang as if it were the only escape from a world that wasn't built for him. Those melodies that seemed simple, cut like knives, leaving deep marks on young people who felt lost, unsure, and anxious about themselves. They saw themselves in Joey, someone imperfect, unafraid to show fear, someone who never tried to become what society expected him to be. Punk spread outward, from American garages to London clubs, then exploded into grunge, alternative, and pop punk. Every new generation found in Joey a spiritual lighthouse. Green Day learned authenticity. Pearl Jam learned perseverance. Rancid learned how to stay true to their identity. Joey's image, leather jacket, slightly hunched stance, hair covering half his face, appeared in illustrations, vinyl toys, tattoos, streetwear. The beauty of the misfit once mocked had become a cultural symbol. When New York renamed a street near cbgb Joey Ramone Place, so many fans stole the sign that the city had to mount it higher than usual. No one steals Mick Jagger's street sign or Steven Tyler's. But Joey was different. He belonged to people who felt they stood at the margins of life. And they wanted to take a piece of him home, like carrying comfort in knowing a symbol once stood exactly where they stood. Joey never received a Grammy while he was alive. The Ramones' classic albums never topped the Billboard charts. Punk history, brutal and full of contradictions, nearly forgot to write his name into some of its chapters. Yet after everything, he became the heart of a genre that transformed global culture. He didn't live like a legend, but he left like one of the voices that will never fade from the 20th century. The path that led him from a child with OCD, standing for hours in front of a door, to a global punk icon was never smooth. He endured childhood isolation, unspoken band conflicts, the heartbreak of being betrayed in love, a lifelong mental health battle, and finally, cancer. Each wound left a mark, but none of them stopped him from pursuing music. What keeps Joey alive in people's memory isn't the eccentric appearance or the unconventional voice, it's his loyalty to himself, something rare in a world that demands artists be perfect, beautiful, normal. Joey was not normal, he never tried to be. And that very abnormality became a mirror for anyone who ever felt not good enough or not accepted. Today, whenever someone picks up an old guitar, plays 3 chords, sings with a trembling voice, and believes music doesn't need polish to touch people, Joey Ramone is there. In every teenager's bedroom, in every newly formed garage band, in every heart that feels like it stands at the edge of life but still wants to speak. Not everyone changes the world through perfection. Some do it simply by being true to the most broken parts of themselves. If you feel the gentle but undeniable strength of this man, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so Joey Ramone's story can continue to be told. Exactly as he lived it. Honest, unyielding, and never backing down.